Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me for another spoiler filled review of a movie that deserves a spoiler discussion. This time, I'm joined by someone different. The man who has decided to join me for this discussion is actually a fellow YouTuber. His name is Ethan Butler. Say hello.
Hi, I'm Ethan Butler.
Awesome. We've been kind of mutually following each other's channels for probably roughly a year and a half or so. I really enjoy the content he puts out, and I feel like we're always kind of like bouncing off comments on each other's videos. So it's kind of been a long time coming to start a discussion on a movie that both of us saw, especially since in following his content for a while, I've noticed that he tends to have a lot of thoughts about Marvel properties, and I tend to as well. So, yeah, I thought what better time to talk about it than with probably the Marvel movie that has the most, honestly, visual personality since James Gunn stepped into the picture.
Yeah, I'd say so. I'd say definitely when it comes to MCU films specifically, it's definitely one of the best directed. It just it has flavor and it has life to it, which is unfortunate. It's unfortunately something that the MCU hasn't really had in a long time. Since I think probably the last film that I saw that I could really like feel the director's voice behind it was probably Thor Ragnarok. That was
Mm,
what
yeah.
2019? No, 2017. Yeah, so that was a while ago.
I think a lot of us were worried, film fans, when Sam Raimi was hired to direct the movie. Like in the back of my mind, I was kind of thinking of the that Wizard of Oz prequel that he made back in 2013, which was just that was the most bland movie I had ever seen. And
I remember watching it. I don't remember a ton about it. I just remember not enjoying it very much. And if somebody told me Sam Raimi directed it, I probably wouldn't believe you unless I looked it up.
yeah, it's so indistinguishable from the rest of the like Disney schlock that gets put out, especially with all these like live action movies. But
Mm-hmm.
so
They did
that
the same thing with like with Guy Ritchie with was it 2019 Aladdin. Like Guy
oh
Ritchie has
yeah,
such a distinct style, and when I saw Aladdin, I was just like, I couldn't believe that that was the same man who made like The Gentleman and a bunch of other stuff. Like it was just so weird to see that, and yeah, honestly, I feel like Disney's just known for really stripping a lot of filmmakers' voices away. So.
and yeah, the same is even the case for the MCU, where like we've seen movies that like Ant Man and the Wasp, for example. You wouldn't be able to like
Mhm.
distinguish who made that from any other cookie cutter movie that gets made nowadays. But
Mhm.
I was really happy ultimately that you know they not only let Sam Raimi be very creative with the camera work in the movie, but creative in the way that like he's essentially been making movies since the early 80s with the original Evil Dead. Like
Mhm.
um I saw it alone, and so I wasn't able to like bounce off the commentary with my friends on this kind of stuff while it was happening, but
Mhm.
I'm sitting there thinking he's literally recreating shots from like the Evil Dead and Drag Me to Hell, and I'm like, wow, they really let
Yeah.
him go hard on this one to an extent, but like
Yeah, I mean it's still an MCU film, so you're definitely going to get a lot of bland sequences here and there, but I think there was a letterbox review I read where it was like I think you probably read it too. It was like they let Sam Raimi direct some scenes in this movie, which is kind
oh
of what I
yeah,
felt like cuz there were a lot of sequences where I was like, this is definitely a Sam Raimi movie. And then there were a lot of sequences where I was just like, it's kind of everything else you've seen before. But honestly, I was surprised at the ratio between like the hardcore Sam Raimi stuff and the pretty standard MCU proceedings. So I thought it was very interesting to see how there was a lot more of a they let him go a lot harder than I thought they would let him go,
hmm
but it wasn't as much as I probably would have liked. But they, I'm glad that they at least let him go to places that you know he was able to go to.
yeah, for sure. I guess what are some ways that you wish he could have been a little bit more unleashed, if you would say?
Um, I think a lot of the stuff with what was her name, America Chavez, that character.
Mm.
Um, I found I thought the performance was fine. It was really just the the way the character was written. That's mostly a writing issue, but I don't know. When I watch Sam Raimi's original Spider-Man films, they're corny, but they're very wholesome and there's a lot of heart to it. All of the characters just have a lot of you could really tell that there's a lot of giddiness and joy when they were take bringing those characters to life. So it was very, I guess, just disappointing to see like a character that's actually a pretty major part of the story, like she's in it a lot more than I expected. And to just kind of see them not do that many interesting things with her character and her arc, I just felt kind of let down with that. Like there's the one scene where she's looking at her flashbacks with like, her two moms, and
Yes.
I was just sitting there. I was like, you could do something really interesting with this, but all it was just her kind of staring, and she cried a little bit, and then they kind of moved on. And I was just kind of, it just kind of left me like a little bewildered. Like you could have done a lot more with that sequence and with that flashback. You could have done something a little more creative with, the way the flashback was directed, or I don't know. I just feel like there was a lot that they could have done, and I was underwhelmed in that department. But I don't know. I felt like once it reaches like the halfway point, like that's really where it starts to ramp up and become like a real Sam Raimi movie. And before it was like, okay, I can kind of see some of the Sam Raimi-esque elements here, but then like that second half comes and it really goes all out, and that was the stuff I really liked.
About the America Chavez stuff, like I did think that scene was really good in the sense that they allowed her to have a moment for us to not only have her explain her backstory, but at least, you get to visualize it in a very
Yeah, I
emotional
like
way.
that.
Yeah, that was good in that sense. I always appreciate when you get to see character moments rather than just hearing about stuff that kind of happened off screen. Um, but yeah, I agree in the sense that there's not much really that happens with her after that point in terms of progressing your character arc. It's just, oh, this is who she is, and then this is her backstory, and then I would assume perhaps that maybe when we get a Doctor Strange 3 or any other property they decide to stick her in, then maybe we'll get a little bit more, but
Mm-hmm.
left me a little bit cold in that sense.
Yeah, I definitely like what they were trying to do. I just wish that they went a little further to, really provide something that was memorable. Because honestly, looking back at it, I only saw it like a week and a half ago, and I really feel pretty, excuse me, I feel pretty indifferent to that character. I don't remember a lot of what happens to her, and I don't remember a lot of lines and specific sequences with that character. And I feel like there could have been so much more of a memorable quality to it if I think they just like let Sam Raimi like breathe a little more life into it. But there are specific scenes in here where you can really feel him being a little bit restrained. Like the big sequence that I feel like a lot of people are talking about is the scene with all the cameos. This is
yep.
a spoiler discussion though, right? I just want to like make sure that
Oh, we can go full spoilers. Like, be
okay, yeah, I was
as
just making
be
sure.
as liberal with your with your descriptions of stuff as you want to.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are pretty open about this, but yeah, I did not really like this the cameos scene. It really did feel forced in, and that was kind of a moment where I just felt like it didn't really feel like that. You know, a lot of the movie feels like how I kind of imagine, or how I interpret the Last Jedi, and how it's just on its own. It just feels like its own separate story, that kind of works on its own, and it's directed in such a different way from the other things. You know what I mean? Like I like The Last Jedi most, not as a Star Wars film, but I like it as just like a Ryan Johnson guilty pleasure, like a just like it's to me it works a lot better in that sense, and that's kind of how I felt with this one. It feels like a really great, just like Sam Raimi superhero horror flick, and it works really well in that department. But when it tries to do the whole cameos thing, I feel like it's trying to follow the tropes of everything you've seen before, where it introduces a character by their name and their description, and they start saying things about them, and it just kind of turns into your basic, okay, like I see what they're doing. It just kind of feels forced, and it feels like it's really there for to please the fans, but kind of the hollow fan service. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from on that. I really wish that I hadn't seen the trailer and gotten the glimpse of the teaser of Professor X that they gave. That would have
Yeah.
been so cool to like witness just on its own. Although I'm glad that the reveal of Jim, Mr. Fantastic, was not
Mhm.
spoiled in any way. That was really fun. But I guess I don't feel quite as strongly on it being kind of like just a big barrage of cameos. Although I will say that I don't particularly love them implementing Captain Carter into the whole thing. Not necessarily because of the character herself. Like, Haley Atwell's always been great as that character, regardless if she's like the super soldier version or if she's, just the typical, military secretary kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I don't like the idea of what if being canonized into the rest of the story. Like,
Yeah.
that's pretty much as soon as I found out that they basically made that whole entire uh, series canon, the multiverse aspect of it anyway, I'm like, I liked it better when it was just these collections of concepts. But then, you
Mhm.
actually bring in, the actual actor into it in full costume and live action. It's like, ugh. But I really enjoyed that sequence, not just as like, you know, more of a, not necessarily gruesome because some of it is censored, obviously, off screen for PG-13,
Yeah.
but it reminded me a lot of Invincible. Did you ever watch that, the Amazon series?
No, but I've seen a lot of clips. And I think I know the scene that you're referring to.
Yeah,
So yeah, I've seen that clip before.
yeah, just that one scene that kind of basically tells you exactly what to expect in terms of how bloody that show gets.
Yeah.
The scene in this movie is essentially just that same kind of thing, where you have one character who's just killing everybody
Yeah.
in pretty gruesome ways. Although, like I said, it is censored. But I
Yeah.
thought it was really neat that they went so far as to, you know, eviscerate Captain Carter in half with a Darth Maul style with the with the with the vibranium shield.
Hmm.
And sorry, I'm totally talking like a geek, not like a film critic right now. But I thought that was enjoyable, and I was even kind of surprised that they went so far as to kill that Black Bolt person by doing the whole Matrix no mouth thing. And
That was
then
very unexpected. I did not see that coming.
I didn't either. I'm like, oh yeah, they're pulling a Matrix reference, but they're also doing like body horror. And then
Yeah.
his supersonic sound gets trapped in his own head, and there's almost like an implosion in his brain. I'm like, wow, I would not want a kid to see that, but cool.
I saw it with my cousins, and the youngest was he's like 10 or 11, and then there's a 12-year-old, and then there's like a 15-year-old. And
Hmm.
we all watched it together, and they just sat there and they were just like, wow, this is like really violent, but they were like, I like this. Like they were just sitting there just all nodding their heads. They're like, yeah, this is what I wanted from Marvel. you know. But they also later that night we watched Hacksaw Ridge like
Oh,
together. It's and they picked the movie. I did not pick the movie because they were in town, and I was just like, you guys can pick what you want to watch, and they were like, let's watch Hacksaw Ridge, and I'm like, have you seen that? And they're like, no, but it looks cool. So actually, one of them had seen it. The youngest one had seen it by himself. I don't know. They live out west. They live in Nebraska, so
oh, okay.
I think it's just like a totally different lifestyle out there where they're just more accepting of violence. But I was surprised when I saw the violence in Doctor Strange, and they were just kind of most of the time just pretty immune to it. They were just like, okay, which I thought was kind of funny.
Well, I mean,
But
if they're okay with Hacksaw Ridge, where that the violence in that is borderline on-screen carnage, so
yeah,
I can understand where they're coming from, and maybe not being desensitized, but being like,
hmm
okay, like,
they're
is that
just
it?
they're just used to it. I mean, it's just part of life, but for them. But I don't know. It was funny. Like they were actually. I'm going off track here, but we one of them wanted to watch The Walking Dead. um, and I had never seen it before, but I was like, "You're the guest. You get to watch what you want." So they put on The Walking Dead, and we're just like, "Oh wow!" Like there's like severed heads, and zombies were like half of their severed bodies like crawling on the ground. You see everything, and they were just all pretty chill with it. I thought that was so weird because like as a kid that would totally horrify me, but completely different lifestyle from mine. Yeah. Anyway, what were we talking about? Doctor Strange.
Yeah, so we were talking about like just kind of the violent content in it, which I
Yeah.
personally don't have a problem with. Like, I know there are a lot of people kind of in like our same church circle who might, of course, be a bothered by the level of violence that it's in the movie, gruesome
hmm
or otherwise, but also just the way that evokes demonic imagery. Um,
Yeah.
which again, I don't have a problem with either. Like, I've seen
Yeah. I
some
know.
pretty rough movies in my life, but I just thought it was really interesting how they were able to not only go down the magic route, but they're able to let Sam Raimi kind of go and again kind of retread some of the same tropes that he's gone in some of his horror movies, like with, I don't know if you've seen any of the Evil Dead movies or not, but there is in Evil Dead 2, they find the Book of the Dead. And that
hmm
might be in the first one too, I can't remember, but opening that book is essentially what leads to all of the undead creatures emerging,
hmm
called the Deadites. And in the Doctor Strange, it's called like the Book of the Damned or something. And
hmm
so I thought that was really interesting, the parallels just to his own movie universe. But Drag Me to Hell also has, them summoning demons. And I don't know, like, I like the fact that in that last act three, they do all these things that are very much so turning the superhero genre into more of a melding between the horror genre as well. We've had that with things like, the Blade movies, and then a couple years ago we had Brightburn, which was kind of playing off that evil
hmm
Superman sort of trope. I'm glad that we were able to see it visualized in the sense that general audiences can kind of appreciate that, but also it's not so overboard to where, certain groups are going to be really offended by the way things are brought up. So,
Yeah, it's like it's edgy PG-13, but it's not like really pushing it. Like
yeah,
that
you're
was
not going
that
to.
there's a whole thing all over Twitter where people would take that quote, Doctor Strange 2 is really pushing that PG-13 rating, and then they would show clips from like actual PG-13 movies that are like way more violent. Um like a True Grit, the 2010 one where like fingers are getting cut off and getting shot, like you've seen like or The Mask of Zorro where you see like severed heads and severed fingers and stuff. Like this stuff was like way more accepting back then. I think it's the fact that it's coming from Disney is what's really surprising people. If it didn't have that Disney logo stamped on it, like I'm pretty sure that people wouldn't have that much of an issue with it.
Yeah, that probably is true. It's not even like the most violent thing Disney's put out either. I mean, like we talked
Yeah.
about The Last Jedi earlier, and that has some pretty gnarly
hmm
stuff in it. Um,
Yeah.
in addition to like the Pirates of the Caribbean movies,
Oh yeah.
that was the very first PG-13 movie I ever saw in a theater. It's just kind of interesting the progression of Disney from that being probably their first big PG-13 movie that kind of surprised everybody for being how violent it was, but
hmm
now it's just kind of more of a common thing that you'll see movies with that rating. But I think the movie's tone serves it well, especially because the movie is so inventive with all the different types of shots that we see. A lot of them being Dutch angles that are implemented properly.
Yeah.
A lot of swivel shots and rotating at camera angles too, along with some over the shoulder work that I think was really effective in one of the scenes where Scarlet Witch is spying on the alternate universe version of Wanda. That was kind of like another Evil Dead thing that I noticed because they use a lot of those kind of camera angles in that movie too, handheld over the shoulder kind of stuff, but nothing shaky. Just you can clearly see that a cameraman's holding it.
I like that. I feel like it put a lot more life into it, whereas like a lot of other things, like I don't know, Ant-Man the Wasp you mentioned, it's all very stationary. There's not a lot of movement. And even when there is movement, it doesn't really have a lot of life to it. But there's just something about the way Raimi's able to, control his films where there's like that one shot where there's like a door opening and it just tilts right in there. It gets a really beautiful Dutch angle, and I was just so excited. Like that just made me smile in the theater. And my uncle was watching with us as well. They were all in town. At the end of the movie was like that was like a very Sam Raimi movie. Like there's just so much personality to the shot composition and everything. I don't know. I was just really impressed that they actually let somebody actually take charge and put some life into it, which I don't know. I just really like it where a lot of stuff that Marvel makes and Disney makes is just all feels very corporate, very safe, very factory produced, you know. And it was just really nice to see something that just felt fresh. It just took me back to, the original Spider-Man movies, which were just totally inspired in this whole surge of superhero movies, like the industry has not been the same since, and he's much to thank for that, for better or for worse. But I don't know, I was very impressed. I thought the film was very good. Yeah, my biggest issues really come down to mostly the screenplay. I just think it's a quite all over the place. It's nothing with the dialogue itself. Like I think it's fairly well written. I mean, the lines themselves are corny, but that's part of the charm, and I like that. There's like one line where Rachel McAdams just screams, "Go back to hell,"
Oh, jeez.
and it was just like it was exactly what I wanted. I was just like, "Yep, this is just classic Raimi." But when it comes to like the actual script, I think it's mostly just the way like the film itself is structured. I just feel like it kind of feels like it's has a little too much, free flowing nature to it, where it's just like, oh, we'll just go in this one universe and then we'll go here and we'll go here. And it feels like it's jumping in a lot of different places, but it doesn't really feel like it times itself very well and paces it out very well. And I feel like the film works best when it's just like a cool visual experiment, and it's what a lot of it feels like. It's just like big extravaganza of just special effects and just a lot of really cool um shot composition. And I was just kind of like, this is the stuff that I like, but also if it wants to have like a real story, you've got to like keep it together a little more, if that makes sense. And it felt just kind of like messy. Some scenes felt too long, some felt too short. It just was very inconsistent. And sometimes it really worked for me, other times it didn't. Honestly, depends. So
I think you pretty much hit it right on there on the money. Like, it is very interesting from a visual standpoint, and this will kind of be my final comments on it because of time. But
mhm.
yeah, I love it in a visual sense, and I don't really ever feel like there were huge chunks of the movie that flowed slowly for me, unlike some other people. I think it was pretty consistent in terms of its pace and in terms of how I enjoy things. But I do feel that the movie could have been stronger with its choices of storylines. You mentioned the Rachel McAdams line earlier, and in the moment it's funny, but then I'm thinking, why are you here again?
Yeah,
That whole, sorry, no offense to Rachel McAdams at all, she's a great actress, but I
yeah.
I just don't get anything out of that storyline. Like, they
Hmm.
were kind of pushing it with that what if episode with Doctor Strange, but here I just felt it was kind of unnecessary.
Yeah, a lot of it
Um,
just felt like that whole romance just came out of nowhere because it was there in the first movie, but is not that central of a plot point. And now they just feel like they bring it back, and a lot of Doctor Strange's character in the movie feels just built around the fact that he doesn't get the girl he wants in any universe. And it's just like, is that it? Like that was most of his characterization, where I felt like someone like Wanda was far more interesting because at least she like there's something more I guess, emotional about her thing. You know, like she wants to be with
Oh,
her
of course.
kids. That's something you can empathize with a little more than, you know, a dude who's just like, he just like cries and pouts that he can't get the girl he wants. I'm like, whatever, man. Like, deal with it. Like, I don't know. I felt like that was kind of one of my biggest issues, was actually like Strange's characterization himself, because the character was likable, but like the way he was actually written into the story, I didn't find to be all that interesting or compelling.
Yeah, it could have been much better with that.
Yeah.
But I at least like in the end that they found a way to make his character arc, in a sense, a good parallel against um, Wanda's. And in this sense, Wanda's arc is sort of repeated from WandaVision, but I like that both of them have to learn to accept what they should or shouldn't want, and then finding the means in order to find that thing.
Yeah. I did
Um,
like that.
in addition to that, I think this is a good conclusion to Doctor Strange's whole thing about trying to figure out, is there an alternate solution to solving the problem? Because there was that question that the one surgeon guy at the wedding posed him, like, are you sure that this was the only way you could have saved everybody? And in the very end, he could have, just stripped America of all of her powers, but then he's like, no, I know of another way we can do this. So I think it's cool that he was able to open himself up to alternate solutions. That was a good way to wrap up his character. But
Yeah.
you're right, that whole angle of his love interest being so central to his character arc, I'm like, dude, just let him be single. Like,
Yeah. Just let him be a character. Don't be so reliant on another character's choices. Like, it just didn't really work for me that much.
do you have any other final things you want to say about it?
Um, I mean, I liked it a lot. Elizabeth Olsen was great. I forgot to mention that,
Yes,
but
she was.
she was wonderful. She was definitely my favorite part. She gave my favorite performance in the film. Really cool to witness a director really directing. But from a writing standpoint, it's definitely one of the messier MCU films, unfortunately. And I feel like it could have been propelled a lot higher up for me if it wasn't for that script holding it back. I don't know if that sentence made sense, but um
No, that's fine.
yeah,
Um,
overall I enjoyed it. Didn't love it, but I really, really liked it. So
sounds good. Well, I don't really have anything else to add other than I really enjoyed it too.
hmm.
In any case, thanks Ethan for joining me for this conversation. Can you want to let people know where they can find you?
YouTube. Um it
All
should
right.
be linked down below. It's just my
Yes.
name. I should be the first one that pops up because my name is weirdly not that common on YouTube. So yeah.
Cool, but I will make sure to post a link there. So go out and check his channel out and give him a good old subscribe and notification. Same for me. We'll probably have more discussions like this in the future, but thanks
Mhm.
again for joining me.
Yeah, thank you.